Detective Sergeant Alec Morrison of London's Metropolitan Police is used to tracking down clues to convict criminals. I remember it was January day. I was made aware that there had been a very serious armed robbery stroke aggravated burglary. It was, in the morning. The couple were inside their own house having their cup of tea when they get a knock on the door. The gentleman of the house, he went to the door. He opened it, and these two thugs forced it away into the house wearing their balaclavas carrying a gun. The gentleman of the house and his wife were tied up whilst the robbers held a gun to their head and kept demanding, "Where's the jewelry? Where's your cash?" And this went on for 2 hours. And that is an extremely long time for such a vicious offense to take place. And then they heard a key in the door, and it was the Portuguese of Pearl returning to the house having been out for the morning. They put the gun to Powderheads and asked her the same questions. They took a couple of watches, some jewelry, and some cash, and the total value was pounds. They ran to the getaway car, which was just parked outside the house. They took the balaclavas off. As they were running, the doer came running after them. She saw her neighbor. She shouted, "We've been robbed. They've robbed us at gunpoint." So the neighbors called the police. So as far as we're concerned, there's two people out there, armed and dangerous and very ruthless people, who needed to be captured. Alec has to stop them fast, and within, he gets a call. An abandoned car has been spotted, and the registration matches the getaway vehicle. This was kind of a very fast-moving scene, really, because we didn't really have a lot of time to think about it because things were happening one thing after the other. Quick off the mark. Alec gets his team to check out the car from top to bottom. They checked on the full registration number of the car, and lo and behold, it showed that it had been stolen from West London, but it had only been reported about or half an hour before it was actually found. So I asked for a forensic search, and when the scenes of crimes officer looked, one of the first things he saw in the footwell was a balaclava. As the investigating officer, this was quite exciting news for me. What we had in mind is any kind of fibers that might be on there, maybe head hair inside. We had to make sure that that was bagged and ready to go off for examination at the laboratory. Just hours after the crime, Alec has already got a reported stolen vehicle with a balaclava belonging to one of the robbers inside. But it's not the only clue. He then opened the glove compartment, and in there, he found a file axe. He opened the front page, and he read out the name Pontin and an address in West London. Alec has a diary with a name, but how can it be linked to the robbery? The first thing we had to do is get hold of the owner of the vehicle and ask her, did she recognize the name on this file of facts? Within of that phone call, she denied all knowledge of this. She didn't know the name Pontin, and she wasn't aware that the file axe was in the cars. That made me think there's a damn good chance that this is going to belong to one of the two robbers that we're looking for. They were more Ludel and Hardy than Bonnie and Clyde. But still, it was a ruthless crime. They had to be coped. Alec wastes no time in paying a visit to point in suspect number 1. When the officers got there, they spoke to his mother, and about an hour or two later, I get a phone call from Harrow Road Police Station to say that Mr. Pontin had presented himself at the front counter and wondered why I wanted to talk to him. M.S. immediately arrested on suspicion of aggravated burglary, but Alec has only hours to keep him in custody and find enough evidence to charge him before he's released. He starts with the facts. We told him, obviously, that there had been a robbery, that the car was used in the robbery, and in that car was a file of facts with his name. He says that, and he'd seen a car in the street with a Pharrell sign on it, and spoke to the female owner of the vehicle, and he asked if he could test drive the vehicle, and he says that during that test drive is the time that he must have left his file axe in the vehicle. So I felt rather deflated then, because I thought it's quite plausible that he may have test driven this vehicle. I'm still, of course, very suspicious of him, but when you are lacking in evidence, then Alec has an even bigger setback. And then he gives us this alibi of being with his grandparents. And he told how he went and he sat with them and drank coffee and biscuits in their lounge, and they chatted for about hours, and he left there around about in the afternoon. Alec knows he's got to find two dangerous robbers. His gut is telling him he's got one of them, but he's got nothing to connect him to the vicious attack with time. Against him, how can he disprove Point's alibi? In our next case, a sticker on a laptop is the key to catching a burglar on the run in Europe. PC Mark Pollock is with the Aon and Somerset Police Force. He loves his job. It's the only thing I've ever really wanted to do since I was a little kid. I used to arrest my friends, stop them on their bikes, and things like that, so very, very cheesy. Mark's working on a specialist burglary task force when he gets a call out to an unusual spate of breaking, and this is the location of the burglaries that occurred in January of. As you can see, it's quite a small village. The time that the burglaries took place after Christmas, we would expect things like PlayStations or Xbox to have been taken. However, we were noticing that these were being ignored and favored for things like silverware jewelry, antique hairbrushes, and mirrors, and things like that were being taken, which is really unusual nowadays. Some items like laptops and cameras have been taken, but it's the personal treasures that cause the most distress. The victims weren't worried about the monetary value of the property. It was more the memories and the sentimental value, a brooch that had been handed down from a grandmother, a war medal that had been handed down from an elderly relative, and so it made it much more personal for me. With 7 burglaries in just days, the sleepy village is a clear target. Mark's up against it to catch the thieves. On one night, there were 2 burglaries, and there was a couple of nights off, and there were another couple of burglaries. This concerned us. It's not an area we would even consider to have one. It's quite an affluent area, large houses near to the road, and so a lot of the residents were quite nervous. They were worried if they were going to be the next victim to the burgies. With a tiny population of under 1,000 people, the close-knit community are on high alert and are looking to Mark to put a stop to the crimes. The team were feeling quite under pressure to find out who was committing these burglaries. Mark starts by looking at the traffic coming in and out of the village. We trolled through the local CCTV in the area, but we weren't getting any hits. Another line of inquiry for us to look at was to use the motorway network AMPR cameras, just to see if there was anyone in the area. And unfortunately, there weren't any vehicles that were in the vicinity at the same time for all of the offenses. But there is some positive news. The criminals have been careless and left a trail of clues behind them. We noticed that there were DNA-rich material being recovered. We found that a number of the scenes had fingerprints as well from the point of entry. We determined that there were probably more than 2 people involved. A lot of the scenes we were having 2 different footwear patterns. Finally, a breakthrough. This could be the key to solve the crimes. But when the information is run through the national database for a name, there's not a single match. We were getting full profiles from DNA, we were getting good quality fingerprints from the scenes, and just getting nothing back was really disheartening. We didn't really know where we were going to go next. We had the evidence there to arrest somebody, but we just didn't have the name of the person that we had to arrest. We'd spoken to our neighboring forces to see if they'd had anything similar. You know, even sending off the footwear marks to them to see if they'd come across that pattern before. And that was all with a negative response. Mark knows he's dealing with braids and burglars stealing silverware antiques and sentimental jewelry. But with no positive ID or decent lead, the pressure's on Mark and his team to get a result. Then as quickly as the burglaries begin, they suddenly stop. We were glad that there weren't any more victims coming along, but we were also very nervous. We hadn't caught these people, and we didn't know where the next strike might start again. The residents wait anxiously, but the trail goes cold until, out of the blue, Mark receives an email. So it was about a month after the series appeared to stop, so we got an email from the Met police that had come via them from Romania, saying that they'd stopped a chap in a car, gave the name Claudio Popper. He had quite a lot of property in the back of the car, and when they'd spoken to him, he admitted to them that he'd been involved in burglaries in the Tickenham, North Somerset area. So yeah, this was a massive breakthrough. Mark has a possible name, a Romanian called Claudiu Papa, but he has to find the evidence to prove the stolen goods belong to his residence in Tickenham. The Romanian police send photos of them to painstakingly go through to see if there's a match. One of the pictures here shows the amount of property in the back of the car. You can see that it's taken up all of the boot space and also the rear passenger area. Popper's car is packed to the rafters with stolen goods. Mark's got his work cut out. So this is one of the photographs of the items of jewelry. You can see that there's quite a lot of property there. It's really hard to identify individual items. You can see that there looks like there's some metal ribbons and things like that and a couple of watches, but really to get enough detail to get anyone to identify it from that photograph, we were really going to struggle. It seems an impossible task. He has to find an image to link POA to the burglaries. Quite frustratingly, the jewelry, the sentimental things, the things that people really wanted back, hadn't been photographed particularly well due to the sheer volume of it, I guess. But fortunately, there were quite specific photographs of laptops, of digital cameras, and of some other things. Scrolling through one particular photograph, a laptop catches Mark's eye. This laptop had a sticker on it, and as I zoomed in, it became clear that there was a company name from a company that, by chance, I recognized as being a Somerset company. Could this tiny sticker from a local government agency be the answer? Here is the underside of one of the laptops. You can see that there's a sticker with a company name on it. And at that point, we were able to contact the company, make inquiries with them, and they were able to confirm that the owner or the user of that laptop had reported it as being stolen in a burglary. And this was the moment of proof we were able to positively identify that. Incredibly out of photos, Mark finally has his moment of proof connecting Cloudy Papa to the crimes in Somerset. But is it too late? Unfortunately, because of the way things work, they had to let him go because they didn't have any offenses he was involved in Romania. So he was then out and about wherever in mainland Europe. And so we had to start trying to find and locate him in order to arrest him and deal with him. With Mark's suspect somewhere on the continent, it feels like an impossible task to catch him, but he pulls out all the stops. One of our first inquiries was to ask for a borders check. That was to show us where and when he was moving around through borders in Europe and into the UK. One of the results with that was that he had recently gone into Glasgow Airport. A few days later, we got a phone call from our colleagues in Police Scotland. They told us that they had identified that Papa was working at a hotel. Mark has his man. Some of my colleagues went up and collected him later that day from Glasgow and brought him back to Bridgewater, where we interviewed him the following morning. Mark can charge Poa with handling stolen goods, but to convict him for breaking and entering, he'll need more evidence and for Poa to cooperate. The interview lasted about hours, during which time Poa fully admitted his involvement in burglaries. The moment when he tells me, "I'm involved, I've done these burglaries," you almost want to jump up and punch the air, or you suddenly sit up a little bit taller. After his surprising confession, Claudia Poa is convicted and receives over years in jail for his crimes. Once we had charged POA, we then contacted all of the victims for the offenses that he was involved in, and those phone calls are fantastic. Being able to give someone some great news like that after having been through such a traumatic experience is a great feeling. And there's more good news. We've been working with our colleagues in Romania, so hopefully we can give some property back to the victims, and hopefully some of that will be some of the sentimental property that they had taken. Back in North London, Detective Sergeant Alec Morrison has only got hours to charge Point 1 of the suspects accused of a brutal armed robbery. But Poynton has suddenly come up with a plausible alibi, putting the detective firmly on the back foot, in that he told us exactly who he was whilst the robbery was happening. He said he was with his grandparents. It was with quite a heavy heart that we drove towards the grandparents because we knew this sounds like a watertight alibi. We knocked at the grandparents' door. They invited us in, and I explained to them that we suspected their grandson not of being involved in an incident that morning. They said certainly not. It could not have been him. He was with them between, and my colleague took the grandmother into the kitchen, and I stayed in the lounge with the grandfather, and we took a written statement from him, and he went into great detail about the time point and had arrived at the house drinking tea or coffee and eating biscuits, and then pointing left around about. My heart was sinking because I thought, this is a % watertight alibi. I've got somebody I now beginning to believe is an innocent member of the public. Somebody who had voluntarily come into the police station to help me out with my investigation, and I had the audacity to lock him up. The grandparents' alibi has sown a seed of doubt. But just as Alec is about to leave, the grandfather stops him. He wanted to add one more thing. Our friend Ethel, she was here as well. She can vouch. She can say the same as we did. The clock is ticking for Poynting to be released from custody, but Alec and his colleague take a gamble to see if they can get anything new from Ethel. As we were knocking on the door and as we were having a conversation with her, we kind of recognized the lady had a kind of hearing impairment. We had to explain to her in quite loud voices who we were, what we were there for, and as we were explaining to her what we wanted to do, her telephone rang. She had a loud speaker attached to it. "Hello, Ethel." And it was Granddad, thinking that our grandson has been up to some mischief. He's obviously in some kind of trouble. And he says to her, "We told the police officers that he was with us from until, and we know that you came here at, but if the police should come and see you, can you say to them that you were with us between, and is that okay?" She says, "Yes, that is fine." However, I'm sure the officer who's standing just beside me has heard everything you said, and I could hear Granddad swallow deeply. Suddenly, that one phone call changed everything. I was so happy. We knew then that we had our man, but we weren't home and dry. Far from it. There was a lot of work to be done. Once Point's cover is blown, he admits to everything. He just changed the story. Then he said, "Okay, I will tell you the truth." He was concerned that we would arrest his grandparents, so he was concerned that we would arrest his girlfriend, and then he apologized for getting them involved in it. It turns out Poynton's girlfriend has also been covering for him, and she's the owner of the stolen vehicle with the faux facts. She also retracted her statement, and she made another statement to say that Mr. Ponton was her longtime boyfriend. He had the car for a couple of days, and then on the afternoon of the robbery, she gets a phone call. He's in a panic and he says, "Look, something's happened with the vehicle. Can you report it stolen?" Alex able to charge Pointing with the robbery, but there's someone else still at large. We wanted to know who his accomplice was because there's somebody out there who is a ruthless armed robber, so we need to get hold of him. Finally, he gave us the name is Mr. Jordan. So our job then is to track Jordan down. We show him on police national computers as being wanted. Jordan's already known to police, and he's a dangerous criminal. Alec needs to work fast. Jordan was the real ringleader here, and he was the one that had to be captured. There was nothing to say that he didn't have access to another firearm. He was a desperate man, he's on the run, and there's nothing to stop him committing a similar offense again. For weeks on end, we were trying our best to find Jordan. We were raiding premises in West London, and we kept missing him, and he was evading capture. It was getting more and more frustrating as time went by. Alec is getting nowhere. But after a couple of weeks, he gets the news he's desperately been waiting for. I got a phone call to tell me that Jordan had been arrested and he was in custody. How the mighty fall? He was arrested for a simple shoplifting. I thought, good, I'm glad he's been arrested. But in the back of my mind, I was worried and concerned. We didn't have enough evidence with nothing solid to tie Jordan to the armed robbery. Alex has got one last plan. He calls in the witness of the crime, the au pair. The au pair, she made a statement to say that she identified Jordan as being, one of the two. It wasn't a % positive ID, but that wasn't going to be enough. We needed some more concrete evidence, or we needed him to kind of finally admit it. In the interview, Jordan's admitting nothing. It's looking bleak for Alec. Then he spots something unusual. I always remember the small interview room was very bright, and there was a light above Jordan's head. And in his dark hair, I could see that there was a yellowy kind of copperish tinge to his hair. So I thought it might be an idea, maybe a final throw the dice to take some head hair from him. And what we did is we sent that head hair from Jordan to the forensic laboratory together with both balaclavas that were found in the vehicle. It's Alex's very last hope. Would Jordan's hair color match anything found in the balaclava? But the results are worth it. Lo and behold, the forensics came up and said, that is the exact same dye from the hairs, the one in the balaclava and the one we took from Jordan. The hair dye is the crucial clue to connect Jordan to the bad lava and to the brutal crime. Definitely a moment of proof when that came back. For their parts in the violent robbery, Jordan gets years in jail, his accomplice Pointing 7 years. The victims were happy that justice had been done. As far as I'm concerned, I had done my job, and it was a % success.